I'm Olivia Harper, 31 years old, and I'm the Chief Investment Officer at one of Wall Street's fastest-growing firms. I manage billions in assets for clients worldwide, but for years, my parents saw me as nothing but a convenient source of income. When I was 22, they charged me $1,200 monthly rent to live in their basement while my sister enjoyed the master suite upstairs completely free. Last month at their 35th anniversary party, I handed them an envelope. Inside was the deed to their house, the house they'd been renting from me for the past 4 years without ever knowing it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Westfield, Connecticut meant living surrounded by old money and generations of family wealth. Our neighborhood was filled with sprawling colonial homes, perfectly manicured lawns, and families who had summered in the same coastal towns for decades. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Harper, weren't born into this world. They clawed their way in through my father's insurance business and my mother's careful social climbing. Our house on Maple Avenue wasn't the largest in the neighborhood, but it was respectable. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, with a sunroom that my mother had featured in a local home magazine. It was the kind of house that demanded sacrifices to maintain, something my parents never let us forget. "Do you have any idea what the property taxes are on this place?" my father would ask whenever I requested money for a school trip or new clothes. "This house is our family's greatest asset. Everything we do is to maintain our position here." By our position, he meant the carefully constructed image of success that my parents had built over 25 years. The country club membership they could barely afford. The annual Christmas party that strained our credit cards well into March. The luxury cars leased rather than owned to keep up appearances. My sister Charlotte was born into this performance of prosperity when my parents were in their early 20s. 3 years later, I arrived, an unplanned addition that stretched already thin resources. This fundamental difference in our arrivals shaped everything that followed. Charlotte was golden, literally and figuratively. Blonde-haired and blue-eyed like our mother, she moved through the world with the easy confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in it. She was a natural athlete, captaining the tennis team and leading the swim relay to state championships. Her academic performance was respectable if not outstanding, but teachers always noted her leadership qualities and vibrant personality. I was different from the beginning. Dark-haired like my father, but with none of his outgoing nature. I preferred books to team sports and silence to social gatherings. While Charlotte collected friends effortlessly, I maintained a small circle of equally introspective companions. My strengths were invisible to the casual observer, a mathematical mind that could spot patterns others missed, an almost supernatural focus when engaged with subjects that interested me, and a memory that retained everything from historical dates to complex formulas without effort. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unofficial family motto by the time I was 7. The question followed me through childhood like an unwelcome shadow, appearing whenever I declined a party invitation, brought home a report card filled with A's instead of participating in student government, or chose to spend weekends at the library rather than the mall. My academic achievements were taken for granted rather than celebrated. When I skipped 8th grade math to join the high school algebra class, my mother's response was a distracted, "That's nice, dear. Did you see Charlotte made varsity tennis? As a freshman? No freshman has done that in 15 years." The pattern was established early and maintained with remarkable consistency. Charlotte's achievements, no matter how minor, were cause for celebration, special dinners, and proud phone calls to relatives. My accomplishments, no matter how rare or difficult, were acknowledged with perfunctory praise before conversation returned to more interesting subjects. I adapted, as children do. I stopped sharing academic victories, science competition trophies, or glowing teacher comments. Instead, I built a private world where numbers made sense, where patterns revealed truth, and where my value wasn't determined by my social calendar or athletic trophies. By 16, I had discovered the stock market, a realm where my pattern, recognition skills, and analytical mind found perfect application. I opened a brokerage account using money saved from birthdays and minor inherited bonds from a distant grandmother. Starting with just $3,000, I began researching companies obsessively, analyzing market trends, and making small, strategic investments. "What a waste of time," my father commented when he discovered my notebook filled with stock analyses and investment projections. "You should be focusing on activities that will get you into a good college. No one's impressed by a teenage girl playing with stocks." What he didn't understand was that I wasn't playing at anything. While my peers experimented with identities and passions, I had found mine. The market's complex interplay of psychology, mathematics, and timing made perfect sense to me. Where others saw random fluctuations, I recognized patterns. Where conventional wisdom saw stability, I often spotted hidden weaknesses. By senior year of high school, my initial $3,000 investment had grown to nearly $30,000, a fact I shared with no one in my family. I applied to colleges with strong finance programs, eventually accepting a scholarship to NYU's Stern School of Business. The scholarship covered tuition, but not housing or expenses, a detail that prompted the first major family conflict about money. "We've already committed to paying for Charlotte's graduate program at Columbia," my mother explained when I asked about housing assistance. "The apartment we're renting for her in the city is so expensive. You'll need to find a way to make do with student loans or part-time work." The discrepancy was stark. Charlotte, at 22, was pursuing a master's degree in communications after completing an undergraduate degree at Vassar, both fully funded by my parents, including housing, meal plans, textbooks, and a generous monthly allowance. For my education, they would contribute nothing beyond proud mentions at dinner parties that their younger daughter had earned a scholarship to NYU. I accepted this inequity as I had accepted all others. I secured additional scholarships, took evening jobs managing social media for local businesses, and continued growing my investment portfolio. By sophomore year, I had secured an internship at a boutique investment firm in Manhattan, impressing the partners with my analytical skills and market insights. "You have an unusual mind," Marcus Weinstein, the firm's founder, told me after I'd identified a pattern in semiconductor stocks that had eluded their senior analysts. "You see connections others miss. Keep developing that skill. It's rare and valuable." His words affected me profoundly, not because they revealed anything I didn't already know about myself, but because they represented the first time an authority figure had recognized my particular gifts as worthy of development rather than correction. The internship turned into a part-time position during the school year and full-time work during summers. By junior year, I was earning enough to rent a small studio apartment in Brooklyn, allowing me to escape the long commute from campus housing. My investment portfolio, now diversified across sectors I understood intimately, had grown to over $100,000, growth achieved through careful research and strategic positioning rather than risky speculation. I graduated summa cum laude from Stern at 21, with job offers from top investment firms in New York, Boston, and Chicago. I accepted a position as a junior analyst at Weinstein Partners, where my internship experience gave me a head start on other new hires. Within 18 months, I had been promoted twice, managing a small team analyzing emerging technology investments. Meanwhile, Charlotte had completed her master's program and moved back to Connecticut, taking a communications position at a nonprofit with a modest salary. My parents purchased her a new car as a graduation present and continued supporting her financially while she found her footing in the professional world. I had limited contact with my family during these years, returning to Connecticut only for major holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. At these gatherings, conversation inevitably centered on Charlotte's social life, my parents' country club activities, or neighborhood gossip. Questions about my career were superficial at best, usually limited to, "Still enjoying the city?" Or, "Working hard, I suppose?" Then came the recession of 2008, which dramatically altered our family's financial landscape. My father's insurance business, heavily dependent on commercial real estate clients, suffered significant losses. My mother's interior design consultancy saw clients disappear as luxury spending contracted. By early 2009, they were struggling to maintain mortgage payments on the house that had defined their social standing for decades. I learned about their financial troubles not from them directly, but from Charlotte during one of our infrequent phone conversations. "Mom and Dad are really stressed about money," she mentioned casually. "They might have to sell the house. Dad's talking about downsizing to a condo." The thought of my parents losing their home, the physical manifestation of their identity in many ways, gave me an unexpected emotional jolt. Despite the years of differential treatment, despite the taken-for-granted achievements and unsupported education, I found myself unable to simply stand by while their financial world collapsed. I called my father the next day, offering financial assistance to help them weather the economic storm. "Absolutely not," he responded sharply. "We're your parents. We don't take money from our children." "It wouldn't be taking money," I explained. "It would be a loan with favorable terms. I've done well with my investments, even through the downturn." His pride wouldn't allow it. Instead, they took a second mortgage at punishing interest rates and depleted retirement accounts meant to support them in old age. 3 months later, my phone rang at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was my mother, her voice tight with suppressed panic. "Your father's had a heart attack," she said without preamble. "He's stable, but they're keeping him at Greenwich Hospital for observation." I caught the first train to Connecticut the next morning. At the hospital, I found my father diminished. His normally commanding presence reduced by hospital gown and monitoring equipment. My mother looked exhausted, with new lines etched around her eyes and mouth. Charlotte sat beside the bed, holding our father's hand and maintaining a stream of cheerful chatter about neighbors and family friends. When Charlotte left to find coffee, I sat in the chair she had vacated. "The doctor says you need to reduce stress," I said quietly. My father's laugh was bitter. Easy for them to say. "Let me help," I offered again. "Just until business recovers. A loan between family members, nothing more." Perhaps it was the hospital setting, or the mortality reminder, or simple financial desperation, but this time he didn't immediately refuse. "What kind of terms?" he asked finally, his businessman's instincts surfacing even in weakness. "Low interest. Flexible repayment timeline. I'll have papers drawn up that protect everyone's interests." He nodded once, then closed his eyes, either in acceptance or exhaustion. I couldn't tell which. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The agreement we eventually reached was simple. I would provide $150,000 to clear the predatory second mortgage and establish a cushion for ongoing expenses. In return, I would receive a promissory note secured by the house, with interest at 2% annually, far below market rates but sufficient to keep the arrangement businesslike rather than charitable. What I didn't tell my parents was that by this point, at age 24, my investment portfolio had grown to over $2 million. The recession that had devastated their finances had provided extraordinary opportunities for someone with capital and insight to acquire undervalued assets. While I hadn't anticipated the specific market collapse, my habitual caution had positioned me with significant cash reserves when others were forced to liquidate holdings at any price. My parents accepted the loan with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. The money stabilized their situation, allowing my father to recover without immediate financial pressure and giving his business time to adapt to changed market conditions. Within 6 months, he was back at work, though at a reduced pace that acknowledged his health concerns. I expected this financial intervention might alter our family dynamic, perhaps earning a new respect for my capabilities or at least recognition of my professional success. Instead, a strange phenomenon occurred. The financial assistance was simultaneously critical to their survival and completely unacknowledged in family discourse. At holiday gatherings, talk still centered on Charlotte's social connections and community involvement. My mother still introduced me to her friends as my younger daughter who works in finance in the city, while Charlotte was described with elaborate detail about her philanthropic committee positions and dating prospects. When financial matters were discussed, it was always in terms of my father's business recovery. Richard has shown such resilience in rebuilding after the downturn, with no mention of the cash infusion that had made that recovery possible. This peculiar silence might have continued indefinitely had circumstances not forced another intersection of our financial lives in the summer of 2010. I had accepted a new position at Blackwater Investment Group, a prestigious firm that offered both significantly higher compensation and the opportunity to manage larger portfolios with greater autonomy. The job required longer hours and more travel, making my Brooklyn apartment increasingly impractical as a home base. Around this same time, my maternal grandmother passed away after a brief illness. She had lived in a small apartment in downtown Westfield for the 15 years since my grandfather's death, subsisting on his pension and modest savings. The funeral brought the entire family together, including relatives we saw rarely. During the reception following the service, my mother approached me with an unexpected proposition. "Your father and I have been talking," she began, stirring her coffee absently. "With your new position, you must be doing well financially." I nodded cautiously, unsure where this was heading. "We thought perhaps you might want to move back to Connecticut. The commute to the city isn't terrible, and you'd have more space than in that tiny Brooklyn apartment you've described." "I'm not sure that makes sense with my schedule," I replied. "The hours are demanding and late-night trains." "You wouldn't need to find a place right away," she interrupted. "You could stay with us temporarily. The basement has that separate entrance your father installed years ago. You'd have privacy." The suggestion surprised me. I had assumed any return to my parents' home would be viewed as regression rather than practical arrangement. Before I could formulate a response, my mother continued with the detail that clarified her sudden interest in my living situation. "Of course, we'd need to charge you reasonable rent. The house expenses are considerable, as you know. $1,200 a month would be fair for the basement suite, given the neighborhood." The figure struck me as high for a converted basement, even in Westfield's expensive market. But more striking was the fundamental principle. My parents wanted to charge their adult daughter significant rent while simultaneously hosting my sister rent-free in the master bedroom suite, a fact I had learned during casual conversation with Charlotte earlier that day. "Charlotte's living at home?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Just until she decides on her next career move," my mother explained. "The nonprofit work was rewarding but didn't offer much advancement potential. She's exploring several exciting opportunities." "And she pays rent as well?" My mother's slight hesitation told me everything before she even spoke. "Charlotte's situation is different. She's between positions right now, and her car payment is quite high. Besides, she helps around the house tremendously, organizing your father's files, helping me with dinner parties. It's a different arrangement." It had always been a different arrangement. That was precisely the point. I should have declined immediately. I had the financial means for comfortable housing anywhere. In the New York metropolitan area, my salary at Blackwater started at $225,000 annually plus performance bonuses, and my investment portfolio had continued its steady growth. There was no practical reason to accept such an obviously inequitable arrangement. Yet something compelled me to say yes. Perhaps curiosity about whether our family dynamic might finally evolve, or simply the convenient timing as my Brooklyn lease ended. Whatever the reason, 2 weeks later, I moved into the converted basement of my parents' home, writing my first $1,200 rent check with a sense of surreal detachment. The basement suite consisted of a bedroom, small sitting area, and bathroom, all finished with the minimum standard my father considered acceptable for living space. The separate entrance provided nominal independence, but practical matters, laundry, kitchen access, parking, required regular interaction with the household upstairs. Charlotte occupied the true master suite on the second floor, the largest, bedroom with attached bath and sitting room that had originally been my parents' domain. They had relocated to the slightly smaller guest suite across the hall, explaining that Charlotte needed the extra closet space for her professional wardrobe when she moved home after graduate school. This wardrobe was apparently still essential, though she remained unemployed 18 months later. Living under the same roof quickly revealed the extent to which different standards applied to the Harper daughters. Charlotte's unemployed status was described as exploring opportunities and being selective about the right cultural fit. My 80-hour work weeks were referenced as always at the office or too busy for family time. Charlotte's social activities were subsidized without question: new outfits for charity galas, transportation to weekend getaways with friends, even membership fees for exclusive clubs where she might make valuable connections. Meanwhile, my mother inquired whether my rent might be increased to $1,500 after she noticed my new designer handbag, suggesting that, clearly, your financial situation allows for luxury purchases. Most revealing were the family dinners, which I attended when my work schedule permitted. Charlotte would arrive at the table empty-handed, while I was consistently asked to pick up a few things on your way home, or bring that nice wine you mentioned. My contributions to household meals were expected. Hers were celebrated as special occasions. Charlotte made her famous risotto. My mother would announce on the rare evenings my sister cooked, though the dish was a basic recipe from a celebrity chef's cookbook. Olivia brought dessert, was the typical acknowledgement of my offerings, regardless of whether I had selected fine pastries from the city's best bakeries or prepared something homemade during precious weekend hours. The fundamental imbalance was neither subtle nor new. What had changed was my perspective, now shaped by years of independent living and professional respect. The differential treatment that had seemed normal in childhood now appeared starkly dysfunctional, all the more so because it persisted despite my financial contributions to both household expenses and the underlying mortgage they struggled to maintain. Perhaps most remarkably, my parents seemed genuinely unaware of any inconsistency in their approach. When I occasionally noted the disparity in expectations, my mother would respond with explanations that followed circular logic. Charlotte needs more support because she's always received more support. Or, you're more independent because we've always treated you as independent. The arrangement continued for 8 months, far longer than I had initially planned. My work at Blackwater consumed most waking hours, with increasingly frequent travel to meet institutional clients or evaluate investment opportunities. The basement suite became little more than a place to sleep between demanding days, making even its inequitable terms tolerable through sheer irrelevance to my daily life. What ended this uneasy equilibrium wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a casual conversation overheard as I returned through the main house after a rare Sunday at the office. My parents were in the kitchen with Charlotte, unaware of my presence in the adjacent hallway. The property tax assessment came yesterday, my father was saying, concern evident in his voice. They've increased the valuation again. That's another $4,000 annually we hadn't budgeted for. Can we appeal it? My mother asked. Possibly, but these assessments usually stick. The market in this neighborhood has recovered faster than expected. Maybe we should ask Olivia for another loan, Charlotte suggested, her tone making clear she saw my financial assistance as an inexhaustible resource rather than carefully managed capital. My father's response was immediate and firm. Absolutely not. The loan she already provided was humiliating enough. A man shouldn't need his daughter's money to maintain his home. Besides, my mother added, Olivia's rent helps offset the increased costs. We might need to raise it again when her 6-month rate expires. She can afford it, Charlotte said dismissively. You should see the clothes she wears to work. Those shoes she had on yesterday probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. I stood frozen in the hallway, absorbing the casual entitlement in their conversation. My monthly $200 monthly rent, already above market rate for a basement room, was viewed as infinitely adjustable based on their needs, while the $150,000 loan that had saved their home was considered my father's personal humiliation rather than the family's financial salvation. In that moment, standing unnoticed in the hallway of my childhood home, I made a decision that would alter our family dynamic permanently. If financial arrangements were to be the primary basis of my relationship with my parents, then those arrangements would be conducted with the same strategic approach I applied to professional investments. The next morning, I contacted a real estate attorney to explore options for the promissory note I held on my parents' house. As I suspected, their missed payments and inconsistent adherence to our agreed terms had created a situation where I had legal grounds to convert the debt to equity. In simpler terms, I could potentially take ownership of the house in lieu of repayment. The attorney advised caution. Family financial entanglements often lead to emotional complications, she warned. Are you prepared for the relationship implications? I'm responding to relationship implications that already exist, I replied. I'm simply making them explicit rather than implicit. Over the following weeks, I methodically assembled the necessary documentation, consulted with both legal and financial advisors, and developed a comprehensive strategy. By the time I initiated formal proceedings, I had moved out of the basement suite and into a luxury apartment in downtown Greenwich, close enough for convenient commuting but far removed from the daily reminders of familial inequality. The legal notifications arrived at my parents' home-certified mail. My mother called within hours, her voice oscillating between confusion and outrage. What is this about foreclosure proceedings? There must be a mistake. It's not foreclosure in the traditional sense, I explained calmly. It's a legal conversion of debt to equity based on the terms of our original agreement. But what does that mean? Are you trying to take our house? I'm exercising my legal right to convert unpaid debt to ownership interest. You and Dad have missed 11 scheduled payments in the past 2 years. The silence that followed contained multitudes: shock, betrayal, dawning comprehension. When she spoke again, her voice had hardened. I never thought you would stoop to something like this, after everything we've done for you. The irony of her statement might have been comical in different circumstances. Instead, it simply confirmed the righteousness of my decision. This isn't personal, Mom. It's simply business. The approach you and Dad have always taken with me. The legal process moved forward despite my parents' initial resistance. They consulted their own attorney, who quickly confirmed what mine had already established. The promissory note was legally binding, their payment history was indisputably irregular, and the conversion clause was standard language they had signed willingly. Their options were limited: pay the loan balance in full immediately, or accept the transfer of ownership. Given their financial situation, only one option was viable. 3 months after initiating proceedings, I became the legal owner of the house at 47 Maple Avenue, the home where I had grown up, the symbol of my parents' social aspiration, and now my most ironic investment property. The terms I offered as their new landlord were simple. They could remain in the home indefinitely, paying the same $200 monthly rent they had charged me for the basement suite. The amount was below market rate for a property of that size and location, a fact I explicitly noted in our written agreement, but sufficient to cover property taxes and maintenance costs. Charlotte, unsurprisingly, moved out within weeks of the ownership transfer, finding sudden motivation to accept an entry-level position at a friend's father's public relations firm. My parents remained, adapting to their new status as tenants with a complex mixture of resentment and pragmatic acceptance. Our interactions became strictly transactional. Maintenance requests, rent payments, occasional necessary communications about property matters. 4 years passed in this arrangement. My career continued its upward trajectory, with promotion to senior portfolio manager at Blackwater and eventual recruitment to become chief investment officer at emerging competitor Hamilton Ridge Capital. My personal investment portfolio diversified into commercial real estate, technology startups, and strategic partnership with smaller investment firms. The house on Maple Avenue represented a negligible portion of my overall assets, maintained more for its symbolic significance than financial return. My parents' lives followed predictable patterns. My father fully retired following a minor stroke, focusing on golf and his model train hobby. My mother continued her social circuit in somewhat reduced circumstances, explaining their housing situation to curious neighbors as a family trust arrangement for tax purposes. Charlotte married a pharmaceutical sales representative and moved to Boston, maintaining regular contact with our parents while generally avoiding direct interaction with me. Then came the invitation, heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing announcing my parents' 35th wedding anniversary celebration. The formal reception would be held at the Westfield Country Club, with close family and friends invited to honor Richard and Eleanor's lifetime of love and commitment. I was surprised to be included, given our strained relations. More surprising was the handwritten note from my mother enclosed with the invitation. Your presence would mean a great deal to us. Family should be together for milestone occasions. After considerable deliberation, I accepted the invitation. Perhaps time had provided perspective on all sides. Perhaps milestone events genuinely warranted temporary suspension of ongoing tensions. Or perhaps, as the analytical part of my mind suggested, my professional success had finally reached a level where they found relationship with me advantageous rather than obligatory. The anniversary celebration was elegant in the particular way of suburban Connecticut events, tasteful without being ostentatious, traditional without seeming dated. Approximately 60 guests filled the country club's private dining room, sipping champagne and reminiscing about the Harper family's decades in Westfield. I arrived precisely on time, dressed in a simple black Armani dress that conveyed appropriate occasion respect without drawing attention. Charlotte and her husband had flown in from Boston, and she greeted me with the practiced warmth of someone determined to appear publicly gracious despite private reservations. You look well, she offered, eyes quickly assessing my appearance. The finance world must be treating you kindly. It has its moments, I replied. How's Boston? Wonderful. Thomas has been promoted to regional manager, and we're looking at houses in Brookline. The schools there are excellent for when we start a family. The conversation maintained this level of polite distance, touching on safe topics while avoiding any mention of our parents' housing situation or the financial arrangements that had redefined our family relationships. My parents made their entrance, to applause from assembled guests. They looked older, yet essentially unchanged, my father still carrying himself with the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority, my mother elegant in a champagne-colored dress that complemented her carefully maintained blonde hair. They moved through the room accepting congratulations and reminiscences, eventually making their way to where I stood near the terrace doors. Olivia, you came. My mother's greeting held genuine surprise despite my RSVP. Congratulations to you both, I replied, offering the envelope I had brought. I have something for you. My father eyed the envelope suspiciously. You didn't need to bring a gift. Your presence is sufficient. It's something I've been considering for some time, I explained. Today seemed an appropriate occasion. My mother accepted the envelope with visible curiosity, opening it carefully to avoid damaging her manicure. Inside was a single document, the deed to 47 Maple Avenue, modified to transfer ownership from Olivia Harper as sole proprietor to Richard and Eleanor Harper as joint tenants. I watched as comprehension dawned slowly in their expressions, confusion giving way to disbelief and finally cautious hope. "Is this real?" my father asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's official as of yesterday," I confirmed. "The house is yours again, free and clear. Consider it belated recognition of 35 years of marriage." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "But why? After everything that happened?" The question hung between us, laden with years of complicated history and unequal treatment. I considered various possible responses, from magnanimous forgiveness to detailed accounting of emotional debts. In the end, I chose simple truth. "Because I no longer need to own your house to know my own worth," I said quietly. That clarity is something I gained through our arrangements, however unintentionally. My father, never comfortable with emotional complexity, focused on practical matters. "The legal implications are all handled," I assured him. "My attorneys have prepared everything. There are no tax consequences, no hidden obligations. It's a straightforward transfer of property between family members." For a moment, the three of us stood in silence, the weight of years of complicated dynamics suspended between us. Then my mother did something unexpected. She reached for my hand, squeezing it briefly before releasing it. "Thank you," she said simply. It wasn't an apology for years of differential treatment. It wasn't acknowledgement of the fundamental inequities that had shaped our family relationships. It wasn't even recognition of the financial magnitude of the gift I had just presented. But it was, perhaps, a beginning of something new. A relationship based on choice rather than obligation, on mutual respect rather than historical patterns. As I moved away to give them space to absorb the news, I caught sight of Charlotte watching. From across the room, her expression a complex mixture of confusion and calculation. She would have questions later, undoubtedly. The family dynamic had shifted again, and she would need to reposition accordingly. But that was a conversation for another day. For now, I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and stepped onto the terrace, where the summer evening offered perfect temperature and gentle breeze. Below the country club's manicured grounds, the lights of Westfield spread into the distance, the community where I had grown up feeling perpetually less valued, less visible, less worthy of investment. I smiled at the irony. I had needed to literally own my parents' house to finally feel fully free of seeking their approval. The property deed had been both business transaction and psychological intervention, the physical manifestation of a truth I had earned through years of professional success and personal growth. My value had never been determined by their perception of it. I raised my glass slightly in silent acknowledgement of this understanding before turning back toward the celebration. Whatever came next, whether genuine family reconciliation or merely more evolved version of our complicated dynamics, I would face it from position of clarity rather than expectation. That certainty, far more than any financial asset, represented the true wealth I had accumulated over years of being the family's invisible daughter. My first memory of understanding that my sister and I were valued differently came during my 7th birthday party. The celebration was modest by Westfield standards. 10 girls from my class invited for cake in our backyard, with simple decorations my mother had purchased from the discount party store in the neighboring town rather than the boutique shop she normally frequented. Charlotte, then 10, had received a professional magician, pony rides, and a custom cake from Hartford's most exclusive bakery just 3 months earlier. The disparity wasn't lost on me, even at 7. Why is my party smaller than Charlotte's? I asked my mother as we hung crepe paper streamers the evening before. She paused, stepladder creaking beneath her as she secured a streamer to the ceiling. Charlotte has more friends, sweetheart. She's more social. It wasn't true. Charlotte had invited the same number of classmates as I had. The difference was in the additional guests, the daughters of my parents' friends, business associates, and country club connections who were invited to Charlotte's celebration, but not mine. But why can't I have a magician? My mother sighed, the sound carrying familiar notes of impatience and resignation. Olivia, we've discussed the family budget for birthday parties. Charlotte's was a bit more special because she reached double digits. 10 is a milestone. Even then, I recognized the inconsistency. If 10 was a milestone worthy of extraordinary celebration, why had we already been informed that my 10th birthday would feature a sleepover with just a few close friends, rather than the extravaganza Charlotte had enjoyed? The pattern continued. Throughout our childhood and adolescence, visible in everything from Christmas gifts to summer opportunities. When Charlotte wanted horseback riding lessons at 12, my parents rearranged the family budget to accommodate the expense. When I asked for advanced math camp at the same age, I was told, "That's quite costly, and you're already so good at math. Wouldn't you rather do something that develops other skills?" Our educational trajectories diverged early, though not in the way one might expect, given our respective strengths. Charlotte attended Westfield Academy, the prestigious private school that served as educational gateway to New England's elite universities. Despite my consistently higher academic performance, I was enrolled in public school, with my mother explaining, "You're naturally bright. You'll excel anywhere. Charlotte needs more individualized attention." The real reasoning became clearer as we approached college age. Charlotte's path was predetermined, private education culminating in admission to a prestigious university where she would make connections that would serve her throughout life. My academic development was secondary to its potential financial utility. "With your math skills, you could get scholarships," my father noted approvingly when I brought home perfect scores on standardized tests. "That will save us a fortune in college expenses." The narrative was consistent. Charlotte's education was an investment in her future prominence. Mine was a potential cost-saving opportunity for the family. Charlotte was cultivated. I was expected to cultivate myself. By high school, I had internalized these expectations so thoroughly that I no longer questioned them. I pursued academic excellence not for parental approval, which had proven perpetually elusive, but for the independence it would eventually provide. When my calculus teacher suggested I apply for a specialized weekend program at Yale for mathematically gifted students, I didn't bother mentioning it to my parents until after I'd been accepted with full scholarship. New Haven, every weekend? My mother frowned over dinner when I finally shared the news. "That's quite a commitment. Who will drive you?" "There's a carpool with other students from the region," I explained. "I've already arranged everything." My father looked up from his plate, momentarily interested. "Full scholarship, you said?" I nodded, already understanding his primary concern. "Well, that's sensible," he approved. "Good for you, taking initiative." The Yale program introduced me to financial mathematics, the elegant application of advanced mathematical concepts to markets, risk, and investment strategy. While other participants gravitated toward pure theoretical mathematics or physics applications, I found myself fascinated by the complex interplay of quantitative models and human behavior that drove financial systems. Professor Hirsch, the program's director, noticed my particular interest. After a Saturday session on stochastic calculus, he invited me to stay for further discussion. "You have an unusual combination of talents, Ms. Harper," he observed, leaning back in his chair. "Strong technical skills, certainly, but also intuitive grasp of the human factors that mathematical models often miss. Financial systems seem more interesting than pure mathematics, I admitted. There are patterns, but they're influenced by psychology and unpredictable events. He smiled slightly. Precisely. Many brilliant mathematicians fail on Wall Street because they believe markets must behave according to their elegant models. The most successful quantitative investors recognize that models are tools for understanding reality, not reality itself. He recommended additional readings and connected me with former students now working in investment management. These contacts provided insights far more valuable than anything available through my high school's limited career counseling. By senior year, I had developed a clear vision for my future that had nothing to do with my parents' expectations or my sister's predetermined path. While Charlotte toured liberal arts colleges with our mother, evaluating campuses based on social atmosphere and alumni connections, I researched specialized finance programs and scholarship opportunities. My acceptance to NYU's Stern School of Business with substantial merit scholarship should have been cause for family celebration. Instead, it highlighted the fundamental asymmetry in how my parents viewed their daughter's achievements. NYU is a good school, my father acknowledged when I shared the news, though not quite Vassar or Williams. These were the schools Charlotte was choosing between, both with significantly lower academic requirements than Stern, but the right pedigree for Westfield society. Stern is actually ranked among the top undergraduate business programs nationally, I pointed out, struggling to keep defensiveness from my voice. And the scholarship covers most of the tuition. That's fortunate, my mother commented. With Charlotte starting at Vassar in the fall, we'll have significant educational expenses. The message was clear. Charlotte's education was the family priority. Mine was, at best, a secondary consideration managed primarily through my own efforts. I arrived at NYU in September 2001, 1 week before the attacks that would transform Lower Manhattan and the nation. The university temporarily relocated classes away from its downtown campus, creating logistical challenges on top of the emotional impact affecting everyone in the city. These extraordinary circumstances accelerated my independence from family structures. With transportation disrupted and communications unreliable, students learned to depend on immediate community rather than distant support systems. I formed close friendships with classmates similarly focused on creating security through competence rather than connection. Maria Delgado, my first-year roommate and eventual close friend, noticed my self-sufficiency early in our acquaintance. "You never call your parents," she observed one evening as she finished her weekly phone conversation with her family in Miami. "Even after everything that's happened." I shrugged, continuing to review notes for our financial accounting midterm. "They know I'm fine, we're not really phone people." The truth was more complicated. I had called home exactly once after the attacks, reaching my mother who expressed appropriate concern before quickly shifting to news about Charlotte's adjustment to Vassar and my father's golf tournament. The brevity and superficiality of the conversation had made clear that even national tragedy wouldn't fundamentally alter our family's emotional dynamics. Maria, raised in a demonstrative Cuban-American family where daily phone calls were standard, found my familial distance incomprehensible. "That's just weird, Olivia. Families are supposed to check in, make sure you're eating, ask about your classes, send care packages with your favorite snacks." Her description of normal family behavior sounded like fiction to me, pleasant but unrelated to my experience. Rather than trying to explain, I redirected the conversation to our upcoming exam, an area where I felt far more confidence. Academic excellence came naturally at Stern, where quantitative skills and analytical thinking were valued rather than considered socially inhibiting. I maintained a perfect GPA while pursuing increasingly specialized coursework in investment, analysis, financial modeling, and market structures. By sophomore year, I had secured a coveted internship at Goldman Sachs, an opportunity normally reserved for juniors and seniors. The internship provided more than professional experience. It offered financial independence beyond my scholarship stipend. The compensation, generous even for interns, allowed me to remain in the city during summer and winter breaks rather than returning to Connecticut. These extended absences further attenuated already limited family connections. My relationship with Charlotte evolved into annual holiday encounters and occasional brief phone conversations, usually initiated by her. She completed her undergraduate degree at Vassar and immediately enrolled in Columbia's Communications Master's program, both fully funded by our parents, despite their increasingly evident financial strain. "Dad's business is struggling," Charlotte mentioned during one of our rare calls in early 2008. "Something about commercial insurance markets and credit problems." Mom's had to cut back on her charity committee involvement to save on all the donation requirements. I had been tracking financial markets closely as part of my professional development and understood the brewing crisis far better than my sister. Commercial real estate, the backbone of my father's insurance brokerage, was showing early warning signs of the collapse that would eventually cascade through global markets. They should consider diversifying their investments, I suggested. This sector could face significant challenges soon. Charlotte laughed. "I'll let you explain investment strategy to Dad. You know how he feels about financial advice from anyone under 40, especially women." She was right, of course. My father maintained the particular generational and gender biases common among self-made businessmen of his era. Financial matters were male domain, with women expected to manage household budgets but not participate in significant investment decisions. The fact that I was building a career specifically in investment strategy was something he acknowledged without truly registering. When the financial crisis fully emerged later that year, my father's business suffered precisely as I had anticipated. The insurance brokerage focused on commercial real estate lost major clients to bankruptcy and struggled with dramatically reduced commissions as property transactions ground to a halt. I monitored the situation from a professional distance, aware of the general industry impact but not my parents' specific circumstances, until Charlotte's call about their potential house sale. My decision to offer financial assistance wasn't driven by sentiment or obligation, but by recognition of symbolic significance. The house on Maple Avenue represented stability in my otherwise discontinuous childhood. The physical structure that had contained our family's asymmetrical dynamics, but also provided the consistent environment where I had developed the independence that eventually freed me from those dynamics. The loan arrangement satisfied multiple objectives. It provided necessary financial support, maintained appropriate boundaries through formal documentation, and established a new paradigm where my contribution wasn't invisible, but contractually acknowledged. That my father found this arrangement humiliating revealed more about his psychological framework than the transaction itself. My eventual transformation from family loan provider to landlord wasn't planned from the outset, but emerged as logical response to persistent patterns. The basement rental arrangement simply crystallized long-standing dynamics, making explicit the transactional nature of my family relationship while simultaneously quantifying its precise value. Would earn $200 monthly, with conditional kitchen access, and expectations of additional contributions to household consumption. The legal conversion of debt to equity provided empirical conclusion to a lifetime of implicit lessons about relative value within the Harper family structure. By assuming ownership of the physical manifestation of family hierarchy, I completed an ironic circle, the undervalued daughter becoming ultimate authority over the space that had first taught her her place. The 4 years during which I served as my parents' landlord were remarkable primarily for their emotional neutrality. Our interactions assumed the character of business relationship, with communication limited to property management matters, and occasional necessary social obligations. I paid property taxes and insurance, authorized necessary repairs, and maintained the structure in appropriate condition. They submitted monthly rent checks, reported maintenance requirements, and continued their social lives with minor accommodations to reduced financial circumstances. Charlotte's hasty relocation to Boston following the ownership transfer reflected her fundamental discomfort with disrupted hierarchies. Having defined her identity largely through privileged position within family structure, she found revised arrangements personally threatening rather than merely financially inconvenient. Her subsequent career development and marriage plans accelerated accordingly, suggesting urgent need to establish new status framework independent of original family system. I observed these dynamics with professional detachment, analyzing familial behaviors with the same objective assessment I applied to market patterns or investment opportunities. This analytical perspective provided protection against emotional entanglement while allowing precise understanding of psychological currents, underlying observable actions. The anniversary invitation arrived during this period of established equilibrium. The cream cardstock with gold embossing appearing in my office mail with its implied suggestion of family reconciliation. The handwritten note from my mother demonstrated particular strategy. Family should be together for milestone occasions, invoked abstract principle rather than addressing specific history, allowing for social reunion without emotional accountability. I considered declining. The carefully maintained boundaries of our landlord-tenant relationship had proven psychologically protective for all parties. Reintroducing social dimensions risked complications without clear benefit. Additionally, my professional obligations provided legitimate excuse. As Chief Investment Officer at Hamilton Ridge Capital, my schedule accommodated few personal events beyond necessary client relationship management. Yet something about the milestone nature of the anniversary, 35 years representing more than my entire lifetime, prompted reconsideration. From purely mathematical perspective, such a sustained partnership deserved acknowledgement regardless of its internal characteristics. From investment standpoint, the occasion offered opportunity to evaluate potential return on emotional capital after years of deliberate divestment. The decision to transfer property ownership as anniversary gift emerged from this analytical framework rather than conventional sentimentality. After 4 years, the house on Maple Avenue had served its purpose in my personal portfolio, demonstrating conclusively that authority derived from capability rather than position, and that value existed independent of familial recognition. The asset had generated its maximum psychological return and could be divested without significant opportunity cost. The surprise evident in my parents' expressions when they opened the deed transfer confirmed my assessment. They had adapted to revised power dynamics, but never truly integrated the reality of their dependence on the daughter whose potential they had systematically underestimated. The property transfer represented substantial financial gift, Westfield real estate having appreciated significantly during my ownership period, but more importantly, it demonstrated capacity for magnanimity, possible only from position of genuine security. Because I no longer need to own your house to know my own worth, I explained when my mother questioned my motivation. The statement contained complete truth. The basement rental, the loan default, the ownership transfer, all had been necessary stages in empirical demonstration of value systems operating within our family structure, having conclusively established the objective reality that had always existed beneath subjective family mythology. I could relinquish symbolic control without surrendering essential understanding. Charlotte's reaction from across the room, that complex mixture of confusion and calculation I observed as she watched our parents receive the deed, revealed her recognition that family equations had fundamentally changed. Her privileged position had derived from comparative valuation, now conclusively disproven through objective financial metrics. Whatever relationship we might develop moving forward would necessarily acknowledge this demonstrated reality rather than maintain comfortable historical fiction. As I stood on the country club terrace, contemplating Westfield's lights spread below while celebration continued behind me, I considered the educational value of the entire experience. The mathematics had ultimately balanced with elegant precision. Years of differential investment had yielded proportionally differential returns. My parents had consistently prioritized Charlotte's development, and she had indeed achieved exactly the life they had envisioned: socially connected, conventionally successful, fundamentally dependent on established systems and relationships. They had provided me primarily independence, sometimes neglectful, occasionally painful, ultimately transformative. I had developed accordingly, building capability and confidence specifically because external validation remained consistently unavailable. The final accounting showed perfect correlation between input and outcome, though not in the direction they had anticipated. The property deed transfer represented not forgiveness, but completion, the conclusion of necessary educational process, and commencement of optional relationship phase based on choice rather than obligation. Whatever came next would emerge from mutual decision rather than habitual pattern, offering potential for connection genuinely chosen rather than merely inherited. I turned back toward the celebration, prepared to rejoin social interactions with this clarity firmly established. The remaining question, whether mutual understanding might eventually develop from this rebalanced foundation, remained open for future investigation. The analysis would continue, but from position of conclusive knowledge rather than evaluative uncertainty. The invisible daughter had emerged fully visible, her worth established not through external validation, but through empirical demonstration of inherent value, independent of familial recognition. The weeks following my parents' anniversary celebration passed in unexpected silence. I had anticipated some communication, perhaps a formal thank you note acknowledging the property transfer, or even an invitation to Sunday dinner as tentative step toward revised family dynamics. Instead, nothing. The absence of response was itself a response, suggesting uncertainty about how to proceed in relationship unconstrained by financial dependency. I maintained my own routines, focusing on Hamilton Ridge Capital's expanding portfolio and the technological disruption transforming financial markets. My team had identified promising investment opportunities in financial technology startups, challenging traditional banking models, companies developing blockchain applications, alternative payment systems, and automated advisory platforms. These transformative technologies aligned with my long-standing interest in systems that democratized financial access, theoretically allowing value to emerge based on merit rather than established position. 3 weeks after the anniversary party, my assistant informed me that Charlotte had called the office twice, declining to leave specific messages but indicating the matter was family business. I returned her call that evening from my Greenwich apartment, curious about this unprecedented direct contact. Olivia, thank you for calling back. Charlotte's voice carried the slightly performative warmth she typically employed for networking events, pleasant but fundamentally strategic. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just reviewing quarterly projections, I replied. What's this about? Charlotte hesitated briefly before answering. I wanted to discuss your gift to Mom and Dad, the house. What about it? It was surprising. Thomas and I have been talking about it almost nonstop since the party. We're trying to understand your motivation. The question was reasonably direct by Charlotte's standards. Throughout our lives, she had preferred indirect communication, implications, suggestions, and carefully constructed narratives that allowed plausible deniability if directly challenged. This unusual directness suggested genuine confusion rather than calculated positioning. The transfer made financial and practical sense, I explained. The property represented minimal portion of my investment portfolio, but significant portion of their retirement security. The timing seemed appropriate. For milestone celebration? But after everything that happened, the legal proceedings making them pay rent, all of it, you just gave it back? I detected the underlying concern in her question. Charlotte had constructed understanding of recent family history as conflict between sisters with parents as collateral participants. My unilateral resolution disrupted. this narrative, removing the opposition that partially defined her position. The house served its purpose in my portfolio, I said, deliberately using financial terminology that emphasized transactional rather than emotional dimensions. Its retention no longer offered optimal returns. Charlotte laughed, the sound carrying notes of disbelief rather than amusement. You always did reduce everything to numbers and returns, even family. The irony of her statement was striking, given our shared history, but I chose not to highlight the contradiction. Different analytical frameworks serve different situations. Financial metrics provided clarity in circumstances where emotional factors had proven consistently unreliable. Silence stretched between us for several seconds before Charlotte spoke again. Mom and Dad are confused too, you know. They don't know whether to call you, invite you over, or just send a formal thank you note. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. This hesitation explained the silence following the property transfer. My parents were navigating unfamiliar relationship territory without established scripts to follow. The daughter they had consistently undervalued had demonstrated capability so far beyond their expectations that it disrupted fundamental assumptions about familial hierarchy. There's no wrong thing to say, I responded. The property transfer was business decision with no contingent expectations. They own the house now. What happens next is separate consideration. That's exactly what confuses everyone, Charlotte said, frustration evident in her voice. Normal people don't make six-figure business decisions about family homes and then act like it's just another Tuesday. Normal families don't operate like investment portfolios with assets and returns. I considered pointing out that our family had always quantified relationships precisely, measuring contribution and obligation in dollars spent on education, support provided for career advancement, even square footage allocated within shared residence. Instead, I focused on the implied question beneath her statement. What exactly are you asking me, Charlotte? She sighed, the sound carrying through the phone connection with static undertone. I'm asking what you want from them. From us. Now. Is this about reconciliation? Forgiveness? Making some point about your financial success? Because everyone's walking on eggshells trying to figure out the appropriate response to whatever this is. The question deserved thoughtful answer. What did I want from family relationships now that financial entanglements had been resolved? The property transfer had concluded one chapter definitively, but I had given limited consideration to potential subsequent narratives. I don't want anything specific, I said finally. The house transfer wasn't strategic opening requiring calculated response. If Mom and Dad wish to communicate, they should do so according to their genuine inclination rather than perceived obligation. The same applies to you. That's not very helpful, Olivia. I'm not trying to be unhelpful. I'm suggesting authentic interaction rather than strategic positioning. If that's uncomfortable concept, perhaps that itself reveals something worth examining. Charlotte made small sound of exasperation. This is why conversations with you are so difficult. You turn everything into philosophical examination when sometimes people just need straightforward directions. I'm not responsible for providing behavioral scripts for adult family members, I pointed out. That expectation itself reflects problematic dynamic. The conversation ended shortly thereafter without resolution, but having clarified a central question. What relationship, if any, did I want with family now that financial imbalances had been conclusively addressed? The answer wasn't immediately apparent even to me, requiring careful consideration of potential arrangements and their relative value. 2 days later, my assistant forwarded email from my mother requesting lunch the following week. The message was brief and uncharacteristically direct. Olivia, I'd appreciate opportunity to speak with you privately. Are you available for lunch next Wednesday? Eleanor Harper. The formal tone and use of full name suggested uncertainty about appropriate familiarity level. reasonable given our landlord-tenant relationship over preceding 4 years. I accepted the invitation with equally neutral response, suggesting midpoint location between Greenwich and Westfield that would require equal travel commitment from both parties. The restaurant I selected was upscale but not ostentatious. Contemporary American cuisine in converted historical building with appropriate privacy between tables for substantive conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting corner, table that offered clear sightlines to entry and minimal ambient noise from adjacent diners. My mother appeared precisely at agreed time, demonstrating uncharacteristic punctuality that suggested particular importance attached to this meeting. She had dressed carefully in navy suit that communicated both respect for occasion and awareness of current business aesthetics, rather than country club sociability. The subtle shift in presentation indicated recognition of revised relationship parameters. This was meeting between equals rather than maternal authority engaging filial obligation. Olivia, thank you for agreeing to see me. She settled into the chair opposite mine, placing handbag precisely at her feet. You look well. Thank you. So do you. Preliminary small talk proceeded through appropriate conversational checkpoints, observations about restaurant, comments on unseasonably mild weather, polite inquiries about general well-being. Throughout this exchange, I observed my mother's unusual attention to conversational equity, matching question for question, offering substantive rather than perfunctory responses, maintaining eye contact rather than scanning room for more significant social opportunities. After ordering, she folded her hands on the table and addressed the obvious purpose of our meeting. Your father and I have been discussing your anniversary gift at length. We're still processing its implications. There are no hidden implications, I assured her. The property transfer is complete and unconditional. That's what makes it so difficult to understand. She paused as server delivered water glasses. After everything that happened between us, most people would expect different response. What response would be expected? She considered the question seriously. Continued estrangement, perhaps, or demands for apology and acknowledgement of past inequities, or continuation of landlord arrangement to maintain advantage. Certainly not outright gift of substantial property without preconditions. Those approaches would serve no constructive purpose, I noted. They would prioritize emotional settlement over practical resolution. My mother studied me with unexpected intensity. You've always been practical. Even as small child, you approached problems with remarkable rationality. I remember when you were 8 and wanted treehouse like Samantha Wilson had. Instead of simply asking for identical structure as Charlotte might have done, you presented detailed drawings with lumber requirements and cost estimates. The memory was surprisingly accurate. I had indeed created full construction plans after researching carpentry techniques at the library, believing rational presentation would overcome parental reluctance. The treehouse was never built, of course. My father cited liability concerns while simultaneously arranging Charlotte's horseback riding lessons at considerably greater expense. Practical approaches yield reliable results, I said neutrally. Emotional appeals have more variable outcomes. Yes, well. My mother looked down briefly. That particular lesson was perhaps taught too effectively in our household. The statement contained first acknowledgement, however oblique, of differential treatment that had characterized my childhood. I waited, allowing space for potential, elaboration rather than immediately redirecting conversation. Your father and I have been discussing our parenting choices, she continued after brief silence. The property transfer prompted significant reflection about patterns we established and maintained without adequate examination. Patterns serve purpose until they don't, I observed. Then they require revision. Indeed. She met my gaze directly. We failed to revise our understanding of you as you developed capabilities beyond our expectations. By the time your exceptional abilities became impossible to ignore, We had established relationship dynamics too rigid to easily adjust. The assessment was surprisingly insightful, acknowledging both the reality of my capabilities and the systemic family resistance to recognizing them appropriately. This level of self-awareness suggested significant reflection, rather than merely performative reconciliation attempt. Family systems develop their own homeostasis, I noted. Disruption requires substantial energy. Is that why you pursued such dramatic disruption through the property proceedings? To force recognition that incremental adjustments had proven insufficient? The question demonstrated genuine curiosity about my strategic thinking rather than defensive rejection of its implications. I considered my response carefully, recognizing opportunity for authentic exchange rather than tactical positioning. The property proceedings provided empirical resolution to theoretical question, I explained. Whether family relationships could exist independently of established hierarchical positions. The answer required demonstration rather than discussion. My mother nodded slowly. And now that it's been demonstrated? Now different arrangements become possible. Relationships based on choice rather than obligation or habit. Our lunch arrived, temporarily pausing conversation. My mother approached her salmon with methodical precision, another subtle indicator of thoughtfulness rather than social performance. When she spoke again, her question carried surprising directness. Would you be open to reconstructing relationship with your father and me on different terms? Not as obligation, but as mutual choice? What terms would you envision? Honesty would be essential foundation, she replied without hesitation. Acknowledgement of past patterns without expectation that acknowledgement alone resolves their consequences. Recognition of your professional accomplishments and personal autonomy. Perhaps most importantly, relationship that exists for its own value rather than instrumental purposes. The proposal demonstrated surprising emotional intelligence and self-awareness. My mother was suggesting genuine relationship reset, rather than simply strategic realignment to accommodate changed financial circumstances. Whether this represented authentic personal growth or merely sophisticated adaptation remained uncertain, but the approach itself warranted consideration. Those terms seem reasonable starting point, I acknowledged, though implementation would require consistent commitment rather than merely revised theoretical framework. Absolutely. She nodded firmly. Your father struggles more with articulating these concepts but has reached similar conclusions. We've spent considerable time discussing how our parenting choices reflected unexamined assumptions about gender roles, success metrics, and family obligations. Your dramatic success-following path we neither supported nor fully understood has forced reconsideration of those assumptions. This frank acknowledgement of flawed parenting choices represented remarkable departure from previous family communication patterns, where parental decisions remained sacrosanct regardless of their demonstrable consequences. The willingness to critically examine established narratives suggested potential for genuine relationship revision, rather than merely strategic repositioning. I appreciate your directness, I told her. It represents significant departure from our historical communication patterns. Yes, well, she smiled slightly. When your daughter becomes your landlord before reversing positions entirely through multi-million-dollar property transfer, certain recalibrations become unavoidable. The observation contained unexpected humor alongside its accuracy. I found myself smiling in response, genuine rather than strategic reaction reflecting momentary authentic connection. I would be open to exploring revised relationship parameters, I confirmed, with appropriate expectations regarding pace and scope of potential changes. That seems reasonable. My mother hesitated before adding, Your father wondered if you might be willing to join us for dinner next Sunday. Nothing formal, just opportunity for conversation in more comfortable setting than anniversary celebration allowed. The invitation represented logical next step in relationship reconstruction. Controlled environment, allowing limited interaction with clear boundaries and defined conclusion point. I considered my schedule, noting no significant conflicts that would prevent acceptance. Sunday dinner would be acceptable. Please let me know what time would be convenient. Relief flickered briefly across my mother's features before being replaced by composed acknowledgement. 7 o'clock would work well, nothing fancy, just family dinner. Family dinner. The phrase carried complex associations spanning childhood. Experiences of differential treatment, alongside potential for revised dynamics under substantially changed circumstances. The invitation represented both acknowledgement of shared history and possibility of altered trajectory moving forward. We completed our lunch with conversation touching on neutral subjects: community developments in Westfield, evolving restaurant scene in Greenwich, exhibition at nearby art museum we had both independently visited. Throughout this exchange, I noted my mother's continued attention to conversational equity and authentic engagement, listening actively to my observations rather than merely waiting for opportunities to redirect discussion toward preferred topics. As lunch concluded, she insisted on paying the check despite my automatic offer to handle it. "This was my invitation," she stated firmly. "I appreciate you making time in your schedule." The gesture, while minor, represented another indicator of revised relationship parameters, acknowledgement of my time's value and appropriate reciprocity rather than assumption of filial obligation. Such small recalibrations, if consistently maintained, might eventually establish foundation for genuinely equitable relationship rather than merely modified version of historical power dynamics. We parted with appropriate farewell in restaurant. Parking lot. My mother briefly touching my arm in gesture that managed to communicate both respect for personal boundaries and genuine connection. "Thank you for today, Olivia. It meant a great deal." "It was constructive exchange," I acknowledged. "I look forward to continuing conversation Sunday." As I drove back to Greenwich, I considered the meeting's implications with analytical objectivity. My mother had demonstrated surprising self-awareness and willingness to acknowledge historical patterns without defensive justification. Whether this represented genuine perspective shift or merely sophisticated adaptation remained uncertain, but the approach itself warranted provisional acceptance pending further evidence. The Sunday dinner invitation presented opportunity to assess both parents' commitment to relationship revision within more historically loaded context. The family home, now legally theirs but previously site of significant power recalibration, would provide revelatory setting for demonstrating whether proposed changes represented superficial tactical adjustment or fundamental strategic reorientation. Charlotte's position within this evolving dynamic remained undefined. Her unexpected phone call suggested awareness that family system was undergoing significant restructuring, potentially affecting her historically privileged position. Whether she would engage constructively with revised parameters or attempt to reinforce established hierarchies remained uncertain variable requiring careful monitoring. I recognized potential value in reconstructed family relationships under appropriate conditions. While professional success and financial independence had established satisfactory life structure, selective addition of authentic family connections might provide complementary dimensions without compromising core autonomy. The potential benefit justified experimental engagement provided appropriate boundaries, maintained protective distance from potentially regressive patterns. Sunday dinner would provide initial data point for assessing viability of this experimental approach. I would attend with objective awareness and clear metrics for evaluating interaction quality, noting conversation distribution, topic selection, question patterns, and subtle hierarchical indicators embedded within seemingly casual family exchange. These observations would inform subsequent decision-making regarding optimal relationship parameters moving forward. As I arrived at my office for afternoon meetings, my assistant handed me a folder containing quarterly performance metrics for Hamilton Ridge Capital's core investment portfolio. The numbers were exceptional. Our technology-focused strategy had outperformed market benchmarks by substantial margins, validating analytical frameworks I had implemented since assuming CIO position. I reviewed the figures with professional satisfaction, noting parallel between investment performance and personal development. Both domains demonstrated similar principle. Value emerges from accurate assessment rather than conventional assumption, from recognized patterns rather than established narratives. The metrics confirming investment strategy success reflected same empirical validation as property transfer demonstrating personal capability. The alignment between professional and personal realms created coherent framework for moving forward. Sunday dinner represented potential investment in relationship reconstruction, experimental allocation with defined parameters and clear evaluation metrics. Like any strategic position, it carried both potential return and calculated risk, requiring ongoing assessment rather than emotional commitment. With this analytical framework established, I returned attention to immediate professional responsibilities. The evolving relationship with my parents represented interesting development requiring thoughtful management, but remained secondary consideration to core professional obligations and personal priorities. Balance would be maintained through clear boundaries and strategic engagement rather than reactive emotional involvement. The property deed had transferred ownership conclusively. The remaining question was whether relationship dynamics could undergo equally definitive transformation. Sunday dinner would provide initial indicator, with subsequent interactions building evaluation dataset for determining optimal engagement strategy moving forward. The invisible daughter had emerged, fully visible through financial demonstration. Whether family recognition would develop genuine depth or remain surface acknowledgement remained to be determined through methodical assessment rather than hope or assumption. Sunday arrived with unseasonable clarity, crisp September air carrying hints of approaching autumn without the humidity that typically lingered through month's end. I selected attire with deliberate consideration. Charcoal trousers and cashmere sweater in muted blue that communicated appropriate respect for occasion without suggesting either business formality or excessive casualness. The ensemble projected confident professionalism while remaining suitable for family dinner context. The drive to Westfield took 42 minutes, traffic flowing smoothly along familiar route that connected my current life to my formative environment. As I turned onto Maple Avenue, I noted subtle changes to the neighborhood landscape. New landscaping at the Petersons' colonial solar panels installed on the Richardsons' garage roof, a recently constructed playground in the small community park at Street's End. The area maintained its essential character while accommodating incremental evolution, an interesting parallel to potential family dynamics I was preparing to navigate. The house at number 47 presented well-maintained exterior consistent with its established neighborhood context. Fresh paint on shutters and trim suggested recent attention to appearance, while mature landscaping provided appropriate seasonal color through early blooming autumn perennials. The property reflected careful stewardship rather than either neglect or ostentatious upgrading. Reasonable approach given owners' financial situation and community expectations. I parked in circular driveway, positioning my vehicle and visitor space rather than historical family allocation. This deliberate choice established appropriate context for visit. I was guest rather than resident, equal participant rather than subordinate family member. The subtle positioning would be subconsciously registered even if not consciously acknowledged. My mother opened front door before I reached it, suggesting she had been monitoring for my arrival. She wore casual but carefully selected attire, linen, slacks and silk blouse in complementary earth tones that communicated relaxed confidence rather than calculated impression management. The absence of her typical entertaining wardrobe indicated recognition that this occasion represented different category of social interaction. "Olivia, welcome." She offered warm smile without excessive performance. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation." The greeting followed appropriate social protocols while establishing mutually respectful framework. I entered the foyer, noting subtle changes to interior environment since my last visit before property transfer. The entryway table had been replaced with simpler design better aligned with architectural proportions. Several artwork pieces had been relocated to create more balanced visual flow. These modifications suggested thoughtful reconsideration of established patterns rather than mere maintenance of historical arrangements. My father emerged from his study as we moved toward living room. His appearance contained interesting contradictions. Casual attire suggesting relaxed domestic context alongside slightly stiff posture, indicating awareness of occasion's significance. He extended his hand in greeting gesture that acknowledged our revised relationship parameters, neither the dismissive nod of historical family hierarchy nor artificially demonstrative embrace that would contradict established interpersonal boundaries. Olivia, good to see you. His handshake was firm without dominance display. Can I offer you something to drink? I've opened a Cabernet that's been breathing, or there's sparkling water if you prefer. The offer represented notable departure from historical family dynamics, where beverage service followed gendered patterns. My mother automatically handling such details while my father engaged in substantive conversation. This role adjustment indicated conscious reconsideration of established scripts rather than mere performative equality. The Cabernet would be fine, thank you. We moved to living room, where seating arrangement had been subtly modified from traditional family configuration. Rather than maintaining historical allocation, my father in leather armchair, my mother on adjacent love seat, Charlotte and I assigned remaining furniture according to implicit hierarchy. 3 equal chairs had been positioned to create conversational triangle with side table at each station. The arrangement physically manifested equality principle my mother had articulated during our lunch meeting. My father poured wine into appropriate stemware, distributing glasses with careful attention to equal portions. As we settled into selected chairs, I noted absence of historically mandated conversational patterns. No immediate questions about my professional activities. No automatic updates on community members I had limited connection with. No subtle references establishing parental authority within ostensibly casual exchange. Instead, my mother initiated substantive discussion with direct acknowledgement of contextual significance. This feels different, doesn't it? The 3 of us sitting here as adults rather than maintaining historical family positions. The observation demonstrated surprising emotional intelligence, naming the underlying dynamic rather than pretending normalcy within fundamentally altered relationship. My father nodded agreement, adding his own perspective with uncharacteristic self-awareness. We've been discussing how to approach this evening, he acknowledged. The natural tendency is to fall back into established patterns, but those patterns clearly failed to accommodate the reality of who you've become. Who you likely always were, though we failed to recognize it appropriately. This explicit acknowledgement of historical disconnect between my capabilities and their perception represented remarkable departure from previous family communication. My father had historically maintained rigid commitment to parental infallibility, regardless of contrary evidence. This willingness to acknowledge fundamental misalignment suggested genuine reflection rather than strategic repositioning. Recognition lag is common in family systems, I noted. Established perceptions resist updating despite contradictory evidence. That's rather generous framing, my mother commented. A less charitable interpretation would identify willful blindness rather than mere perceptual delay. This unflinching self-assessment further demonstrated their commitment to authentic exchange rather than comfortable narrative maintenance. I acknowledged the observation with slight nod, allowing space for continued development rather than immediately responding. My father took thoughtful sip of wine before offering his perspective. The property transfer created unavoidable reckoning with reality. Your financial capabilities dramatically exceeded not only our expectations, but our comprehension of what was possible given your age and experience. It forced fundamental reassessment of assumptions we had maintained without adequate examination. Cognitive dissonance requires resolution, I agreed, either through evidence rejection or belief revision. The property transaction created situation where evidence became irrefutable. Precisely. My father nodded. Though evidence of your exceptional capabilities had been available for years, we maintained selective attention patterns that preserved comfortable narratives rather than acknowledging increasingly obvious reality. The conversation continued with remarkable candor throughout preliminary drinks period, establishing foundation of authentic communication rather than performative interaction. When my mother announced dinner was ready, we moved to dining room, with natural transition that maintained established conversational depth. The dining table had been set with deliberate attention to equality markers, 3 place settings distributed evenly, rather than traditional family arrangement, emphasizing parental positions at head and foot. The meal itself reflected similar consideration. Roasted chicken with seasonal vegetables prepared with evident care, but without elaborate presentation that would suggest special occasion rather than normalized interaction. As we served ourselves, family style rather than following historically gendered distribution patterns, my father addressed topic that would previously have remained carefully unmentioned. We've adjusted our financial approach significantly since the property transfer. Your mother has taken primary responsibility for household financial management, something I should have encouraged years ago given her organizational capabilities. My mother nodded confirmation. We've implemented systematic budgeting practices and revised retirement planning to reflect current realities rather than outdated assumptions. The property ownership change actually facilitated these adjustments by eliminating artificial parameters we had maintained for too long. This financial transparency represented dramatic departure from historical family communication patterns, where money matters remained firmly within my father's domain, except when convenient to reference household limitations, affecting primarily my activities rather than Charlotte's. The willingness to acknowledge revised financial arrangements indicated fundamental shift in underlying power dynamics rather than merely superficial behavioral adjustments. Systematic financial management provides significant advantages, I noted, particularly during transition periods where historical patterns require revision. Indeed. My father set down his fork with deliberate care. Though I should acknowledge that my historical approach contained significant flaws despite professional background. Personal financial management activates different psychological patterns than business decision-making. The self-critical assessment demonstrated remarkable evolution from his previous positioning as unquestionable authority on all financial matters. This willingness to acknowledge domain-specific limitations rather than maintain generalized expertise claims suggested authentic growth rather than strategic accommodation. Conversation throughout dinner maintained similar characteristics: thoughtful engagement with substantive topics, balanced participation distribution, and notable absence of historically established power reinforcement mechanisms. We discussed community developments, evolving economic conditions, and cultural events with mutual respect for differing perspectives rather than automatic deference to parental viewpoints. When my mother served coffee and dessert, individual apple tarts, with subtle cinnamon notes, she introduced topic that directly addressed historical family dynamics. We've been thinking about Charlotte's role in our family patterns. Her perspective on recent developments has been particularly revealing about unconscious systems we established and maintained. In what way? I asked, maintaining neutral tone despite subject's potential sensitivity. My father responded with surprising directness. Charlotte's initial reaction to the property transfer revealed how thoroughly she had internalized preferential treatment as natural order rather than constructed system. Her confusion wasn't merely about changed financial circumstances, but fundamental identity disruption. She described feeling displaced without having vocabulary to articulate precisely what had changed, my mother added. It's prompted important conversations about how our parenting choices affected both of you in ways we hadn't fully considered. This willingness to critically examine Charlotte's historically privileged position represented perhaps most significant indicator of authentic family reassessment rather than merely strategic accommodation to changed financial dynamics. The golden child status had previously remained unacknowledged, despite its obvious operational impact on family functioning. Established systems create psychological investment in their continuation, I observed. Disruption affects identity. Structures built around position rather than intrinsic qualities. Exactly right. My father nodded appreciatively. Charlotte developed self-concept fundamentally dependent on comparative positioning rather than independent capability assessment. The recent changes have created necessary but uncomfortable growth opportunity for her. This balanced perspective on Charlotte's development challenges demonstrated remarkable evolution from historical patterns, where her experiences received automatic validation, while mine required consistent external verification. The willingness to acknowledge systemic effects on both daughters rather than maintaining preferential interpretation frameworks suggested genuine psychological growth rather than merely strategic repositioning. As evening progressed toward natural conclusion, my mother addressed future considerations with appropriate directness. We've enjoyed this dinner tremendously and would welcome establishing regular contact if that aligns with your preferences. Perhaps monthly dinners or other arrangements that respect your schedule constraints while allowing relationship development? The proposal demonstrated thoughtful balance between connection opportunity and boundary respect, acknowledging my professional obligations and personal autonomy while expressing genuine interest in continued interaction. The approach represented mature relationship negotiation rather than either entitled expectation or excessive accommodation. Monthly dinners seem reasonable starting framework, I agreed, with flexibility for scheduling adjustments as needed. Of course, my father nodded. We recognize your professional responsibilities create variable availability. The relationship should enhance rather than complicate your established priorities. This acknowledgement of my autonomous life structure as primary consideration, rather than family obligations as automatic priority, represented fundamental shift in underlying relationship assumptions. The approach demonstrated genuine respect for adult independence rather than modified version of historical hierarchical expectations. As I prepared to depart approximately 3 hours after arrival, appropriate duration for initial relationship reconstruction engagement, my mother handed me small package wrapped in simple paper. This isn't obligation-creating gift, she clarified immediately. Just something we thought you might appreciate given recent conversations. The clarification demonstrated awareness of potential gift-giving complexities within evolving relationship parameters, acknowledging history of asymmetrical exchange without allowing it to prevent thoughtful gesture. I accepted the package with appropriate appreciation, maintaining balance between polite interest and excessive performance. Upon opening it, I discovered leather-bound notebook of obvious quality, its cover embossed with subtle geometric pattern rather than overtly personalized identification. Inside front cover, my mother had written brief inscription, "For recording observations and analyses of all kinds, with appreciation for your unique perspective." The gift demonstrated remarkable thoughtfulness, acknowledging my analytical approach without attempting to modify it, providing practical item aligned with my established patterns rather than aspirational object reflecting their preferences. The inscription itself represented perhaps most significant element, explicit validation of unique perspective, previously treated as problematic deviation rather than valuable differentiation. Thank you. This is both practical and thoughtfully selected. We spent considerable time considering appropriate acknowledgement, my father explained. Something that would respect your established patterns rather than attempting to impose alternative frameworks. This explanation further demonstrated their evolving understanding, recognizing fundamental difference between genuine respect for established identity and conditional acceptance contingent upon conformity to external expectations. The approach represented mature relationship negotiation rather than modified version of historical power dynamics. We concluded evening with appropriate farewell gestures, handshakes that acknowledged professional equality alongside familial connection, specific reference to next scheduled interaction rather than vague future intentions, and clear communication regarding practical arrangements. The interaction maintained consistent quality throughout, suggesting sustainable approach rather than merely performative accommodation. During drive back to Greenwich, I conducted systematic assessment of evening's significant indicators. The experience had demonstrated multiple positive dimensions, suggesting genuine relationship evolution rather than strategic repositioning. 1. Physical environment modifications, reflecting revised relationship understanding rather than historical. Patterns. 2. Communication patterns maintaining balanced participation without hierarchical reinforcement. 3. Direct acknowledgement of historical disparities without defensive justification. Thoughtful gift selection, demonstrating respect for established identity rather than aspirational reimagining. Appropriate boundary recognition regarding future interaction expectations. 6. Consistent quality throughout extended interaction rather than performance degradation over time. These indicators suggested potential viability for reconstructed relationship under appropriately defined parameters. While insufficient for definitive conclusion regarding long-term sustainability, the evidence supported continued experimental engagement with carefully monitored boundaries and explicit evaluation metrics. Upon returning to my apartment, I placed the leather notebook on my desk alongside professional journals and reference materials. Its presence represented tangible manifestation of potential new relationship framework, acknowledgement of my analytical approach as valuable perspective rather than problematic deviation. Whether this acknowledgement represented sustainable understanding or temporary accommodation remained undetermined, but initial evidence supported provisional acceptance pending further interaction assessment. The following morning, I sent brief email thanking my parents for dinner and confirming next scheduled interaction 3 weeks hence. The communication maintained appropriate professional courtesy without excessive emotional performance, establishing pattern for future exchanges based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical obligation. My mother's response arrived within hours, demonstrating similar characteristics. Appreciation expressed without exaggeration. Specific reference to conversation topics reflecting actual engagement rather than superficial observation, and confirmation of future plans with appropriate flexibility acknowledgement. The consistency between in-person interaction and subsequent communication suggested sustainable approach rather than temporary performance. Later that week, quarterly performance evaluation meeting at Hamilton Ridge Capital provided interesting professional parallel to evolving personal developments. The investment committee chair noted specific value of my distinctive analytical framework in identifying emerging opportunities overlooked by conventional assessment models, language remarkably similar to my mother's notebook inscription, despite completely separate contexts. Your approach consistently identifies patterns others miss, he observed during my presentation on emerging financial technology opportunities. The capacity to maintain independent perspective while integrating relevant consensus insights represents particular competitive advantage. The observation highlighted fundamental consistency across my professional and personal environments. Value emerged from distinctive analytical approach, previously treated as problematic deviation within family context, but recognized as competitive advantage within professional realm. The property transfer had conclusively demonstrated this reality within family system, creating potential for relationship reconstruction based on authentic recognition rather than historical mischaracterization. As September transitioned to October, I maintained regular communication with my parents through brief emails and occasional phone conversations alongside scheduled monthly dinners. Each interaction demonstrated consistent characteristics: balanced participation, appropriate boundary recognition, and authentic engagement with substantive topics rather than superficial exchange or historical pattern resumption. Charlotte remained peripheral figure during this initial reconstruction phase, maintaining physical distance in Boston while exhibiting cautious curiosity through occasional text messages, inquiring about evolving family dynamics. Her approach suggested continued adjustment to revised relationship parameters, recognition that historical hierarchical positioning had fundamentally changed without clear understanding of appropriate replacement framework. During our second, scheduled dinner in mid-October, my father raised topic he had clearly considered extensively before introducing. "We've been discussing potential family gathering during holiday season," he explained during coffee service. "Traditionally, we would simply assume participation without considering individual preferences, but we recognize that approach reflected outdated assumptions about family obligations. Instead," my mother continued seamlessly, "we're exploring whether structured holiday gathering might provide meaningful opportunity for continued relationship evolution while respecting established boundaries. Charlotte and Thomas would participate, creating opportunity for multi-dimensional reconstruction rather than merely linear engagement. The proposal demonstrated thoughtful consideration of complex factors, acknowledging historical holiday expectations while recognizing necessary revision, addressing Charlotte's integration within evolving dynamics rather than maintaining separate relationship tracks, and explicitly framing gathering as optional opportunity rather than obligatory tradition. "What structure would you envision?" I asked, evaluating potential arrangement with analytical objectivity rather than automatic acceptance or rejection. "Perhaps Christmas Eve dinner," my father suggested. "Limited duration event with clear parameters rather than extended obligation. Emphasis on present interaction rather than historical pattern reenactment. With explicit understanding regarding gift exchanges," my mother added. "Modest, thoughtful selections rather than elaborate displays or obligation-creating presentations." The proposed framework demonstrated remarkable evolution from historical holiday patterns, which had typically featured elaborate multi-day engagements emphasizing traditional roles and conspicuous material exchange. This revised approach acknowledged adult autonomy while creating space for potential connection within appropriate boundaries. "That arrangement seems potentially constructive," I acknowledged, "with clear communication regarding expectations and limitations." "Absolutely," my father nodded firmly. "The objective would be genuine connection opportunity rather than performance of idealized family narrative. If it proves constructive, excellent. If not, we adjust future approaches accordingly." This explicit framework of experimental engagement, with clear evaluation metrics, paralleled my own assessment approach, treating relationship reconstruction as hypothesis to be tested rather than foregone conclusion to be implemented regardless of empirical feedback. The alignment suggested genuine evolution rather than merely superficial accommodation to changed circumstances. The emerging relationship with my parents continued developing along these carefully established parameters throughout autumn months. Each interaction demonstrated consistent characteristics: thoughtful engagement, appropriate boundary recognition, and genuine interest in substantive exchange rather than performance of idealized family script. The property deed transfer had created necessary disruption of historical patterns, establishing empirical demonstration of capability previously unacknowledged within family narrative. This conclusive evidence had catalyzed fundamental reassessment rather than merely temporary accommodation, creating potential for relationship reconstruction based on authentic recognition rather than persistent mischaracterization. Whether this reconstruction would ultimately establish sustainable connection remained uncertain, dependent upon continued commitment to evolved understanding, rather than regression toward comfortable historical patterns. The preliminary evidence supported cautious optimism while maintaining appropriate analytical objectivity. The invisible daughter had emerged fully visible through financial demonstration. The emerging relationship acknowledged this visibility, without attempting to reframe it within historical narrative constraints. The foundation had been established for potential authentic connection based on mutual recognition, rather than hierarchical positioning. Outcome impossible without the property deed's conclusive demonstration of capability previously dismissed within family mythology. The Christmas Eve gathering approached with methodical inevitability, each intervening family dinner maintaining consistent quality while establishing foundation for more complex interaction involving Charlotte and her husband. Our monthly meetings had developed predictable rhythm, substantive conversation balancing professional developments, community observations, and occasional carefully negotiated personal disclosures. My parents had maintained their commitment to revised relationship parameters with surprising consistency. My father had demonstrated particular evolution, replacing historical authority positioning with genuine curiosity about investment strategies and market perspectives. My mother had developed authentic interest in my professional experiences, asking thoughtful questions about team management and organizational development, rather than focusing exclusively on social dimensions. 2 weeks before the scheduled holiday gathering, Hamilton Ridge Capital announced significant organizational expansion, new offices in Singapore and Frankfurt alongside substantial additions to our New York and London teams. As Chief Investment Officer, I would assume expanded global responsibilities requiring increased international travel and strategic leadership across multiple regulatory environments. The Wall Street Journal published detailed profile highlighting the firm's innovative investment approach and my role in developing its distinctive analytical framework. The article appeared on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, I had received congratulatory emails from both parents. Brief, appropriate messages acknowledging professional achievement without attempting to claim contributory role or establish proprietary connection. The communications demonstrated evolved understanding of appropriate boundaries and recognition of independent accomplishment rather than family system achievement. Charlotte's response arrived Thursday evening. Text message combining congratulations with subtle positioning. Impressive profile. Mom and Dad can't stop talking about it. Thomas says we should have you advise our retirement portfolio planning when you're not busy with billionaires. The message revealed continued adjustment to revised family dynamics, acknowledgement of my professional success, alongside attempt to establish access claims through family connection and humorous diminishment. The approach suggested ongoing recalibration rather than fundamental resistance, representing predictable response to hierarchical disruption within established relationship system. I responded with appropriate professional courtesy. Thank you. Happy to recommend qualified financial advisor when you're ready for comprehensive planning. Looking forward to seeing you at Christmas Eve dinner. This reply maintained appropriate boundaries while acknowledging upcoming family engagement, neither rejecting connection opportunity nor accepting inappropriate role confusion. The approach established clear parameters while preserving relationship development potential. The Wednesday preceding Christmas Eve brought unexpected complication. Hamilton Ridge Capital's Singapore office required immediate leadership intervention regarding regulatory compliance issue with potential significant operational implications. As executive with primary responsibility for global standards implementation, my presence was required despite holiday timing. I contacted my parents immediately, explaining situation with appropriate detail while expressing regret regarding necessary schedule adjustment. The Singapore matter requires in-person resolution. I'll need to depart tomorrow morning, returning approximately December 29th. Perhaps we could reschedule family gathering for New Year's weekend, if that aligns with everyone's availability. Their response demonstrated remarkable evolution from historical patterns. Rather than expressing disappointment through guilt mechanisms or attempting to negotiate priority realignment, they offered immediate accommodation and practical support. Of course, your professional responsibilities take precedence, my father responded. International regulatory matters require immediate attention. We'll explore alternative gathering timing and coordinate with Charlotte and Thomas. My mother added practical consideration. Do you need anything before your departure? We could deliver meals to your apartment this evening if helpful during preparation, or assist with any local arrangements while you're traveling. This response represented complete reversal of historical family dynamics, where my professional obligations were consistently positioned as voluntary choices reflecting problematic priorities rather than necessary responsibilities deserving accommodation and support. The evolved approach demonstrated authentic recognition of my career significance rather than merely superficial acknowledgement. Thank you for understanding. I've arranged necessary preparation through my assistant, but I appreciate the supportive offer. My flight departed JFK Thursday morning, initiating intensive 4-day immersion in complex regulatory negotiation, requiring detailed technical knowledge alongside sophisticated diplomatic engagement. The Singapore team demonstrated exceptional capability requiring primarily strategic guidance rather than fundamental intervention, allowing efficient resolution despite holiday timing constraints. I returned to New York late evening December 29th, immediately addressing accumulated correspondence and preparing for year-end portfolio assessments. Among priority messages was email from my mother, confirming rescheduled family gathering for January 2nd, carefully selected date allowing appropriate recovery from international travel while preceding normal business resumption. We've arranged dinner gathering at 6 p.m. to accommodate everyone's schedule constraints, she wrote. Charlotte and Thomas will drive from Boston that morning. Please let us know if this timing works with your post-travel adjustment and professional responsibilities. The message demonstrated continued attentiveness to appropriate boundary recognition, acknowledging travel recovery needs alongside professional obligations without positioning family commitment as automatically superior priority. This consistent respect for independent adult responsibilities rather than family system obligations represented sustainable evolution rather than temporary accommodation. January 2nd at 6 p.m. works well. Thank you for arranging alternative timing. The rescheduled gathering approached with measured anticipation. The Singapore intervention had been successfully concluded, resulting in enhanced regulatory framework, protecting firm interests while addressing compliance requirements. Year-end portfolio performance confirmed exceptional results across investment categories, with particularly strong returns in emerging technology positions I had championed despite initial committee skepticism. These professional achievements provided consolidated foundation for family interaction, entering relationship reconstruction from position of objectively verified capability rather than merely asserted independence. The Wall Street Journal profile had established public recognition paralleling private acknowledgement, creating complementary external validation supporting internal family system revision. January 2nd arrived with winter clarity, bright sunshine, illuminating frost-covered landscape as I drove familiar route to Westfield mid-afternoon. I had selected attire balancing professional confidence with appropriate holiday aesthetic, charcoal wool trousers and burgundy cashmere sweater, complemented by subtle pearl earrings balancing understated elegance with practical simplicity. Upon arrival, I noted Charlotte's vehicle already parked in circular driveway, Boston-registered Audi positioned prominently near entrance. The placement suggested early arrival establishing territorial familiarity, predictable positioning strategy, with an evolving family dynamic. I selected adjacent parking space, neither deferentially distant nor competitively close, establishing equilibrium rather than dominance display. My mother opened door with characteristic promptness, her greeting maintaining established warmth, without excessive performance. Olivia, welcome. How was your trip? Singapore must have been fascinating despite the business circumstances. The inquiry demonstrated genuine interest in my experience rather than merely perfunctory acknowledgement, indicating continued commitment to authentic engagement rather than performative interaction. We moved through entry foyer toward living room, where voices indicated gathering already in progress. Charlotte and Thomas occupied love seat positioned centrally within carefully arranged seating area. My sister had selected holiday-appropriate attire, emphasizing traditional aesthetics. Red sweater with subtle gold threading, complemented by plaid skirt suggesting seasonal festivity rather than professional positioning. Her husband presented complementary appearance in green sweater with khaki trousers, their combined aesthetic creating cohesive couple presentation rather than individually distinctive statements. Olivia! Charlotte's greeting carried complex emotional layers beneath superficial enthusiasm, genuine familial connection alongside subtle competitive positioning and cautious assessment. We were just hearing about your international crisis management. Quite the dramatic holiday. The framing attempted subtle diminishment through characterization as dramatic rather than professionally significant, revealing continued adjustment to revised family dynamics rather than complete acceptance. Thomas extended more straightforward greeting with appropriate handshake and direct eye contact, suggesting authentic engagement rather than strategic positioning. Regulatory harmonization requires personal intervention despite calendar considerations. I responded, acknowledging business necessity without defensiveness or apologetic framing. How was your holiday in Boston? The conversation developed with interesting characteristics, Charlotte alternating between genuine engagement and subtle status maintenance efforts, Thomas contributing thoughtful observations regarding regional, economic developments, my parents maintaining facilitative approach, ensuring balanced participation rather than historically established hierarchical patterns. My father served drinks with characteristic attention to equitable distribution, while my mother coordinated dinner preparation with inclusive approach, inviting collaborative participation rather than gendered expectation. These operational patterns maintained consistency with evolved understanding established during preceding months of relationship reconstruction. As we moved to dining room, I noted table arrangement maintaining equality principles despite expanded participation. Place, settings distributed evenly with no position suggesting hierarchical significance. The adjustment demonstrated thoughtful translation of established principles to more complex interaction context, rather than regression toward historical patterns under expanded family system pressure. Before we begin, my father announced as we settled into selected positions, I'd like to acknowledge how meaningful it is to have everyone gathered together under such different circumstances than previous years. The past months have prompted significant reflection about family patterns and priorities. The introduction established explicit context for gathering, preventing default reversion to historical scripts through conscious acknowledgement of evolved understanding. My mother continued this framing with complementary perspective. We've appreciated the opportunity to develop new relationship foundations with Olivia through our monthly dinners. Tonight represents opportunity to extend that evolution to our complete family system, with recognition that historical patterns affected everyone differently, and new arrangements require thoughtful consideration rather than automatic implementation. This explicit acknowledgement of family system revision created space for authentic engagement rather than performance of idealized harmony. Charlotte's expression revealed momentary uncertainty before settling into cautious receptivity, suggesting openness to revised dynamics despite potential identity implications. Dinner service maintained collaborative approach established during previous engagements, shared serving responsibility rather than gendered or hierarchical distribution, conversation topics selected for universal relevance rather than selective, exclusion and participation patterns balanced through conscious facilitation rather than default dominant structures. Charlotte demonstrated interesting adaptation throughout meal, alternating between historical positioning attempts and tentative engagement with revised interaction parameters. When describing recent professional development within her marketing role at Boston-based consumer products company, she initially framed achievement through familiar comparative lens. Nothing like managing billions in investments, of course, but significant responsibility for our regional division. My mother gently redirected this comparative framing with skillful intervention, Each industry presents unique challenges requiring specific expertise. I'd love to hear more about the particular strategies you've developed for your market segment. This redirection demonstrated evolved parental approach, neither reinforcing historical preferential positioning nor overcorrecting through artificial equivalence, but rather creating space for authentic contribution within appropriate context. Charlotte responded with genuine engagement, describing specific campaign development with professional confidence, suggesting authentic capability recognition. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.